Kirtland was cash-strapped. They were land-rich and money-poor. So basic of economics, they needed to free up some money that was tied to land. The problem was banking at this time wasn't the way banking is today. And the church decides that they want to set up their own bank. The banknotes are basically tied to land value as a whole. They want to create cash flow in Kirtland. They appeal, by the way, to the government to form an official bank, and they're told no. So the church starts their own bank, and with promises that if they're faithful and loyal, this bank will bless their life. Sidney Rigdon was the secretary of the bank, and Joseph Smith originally was the treasurer of the bank. But trouble begins almost immediately. It opens in January of 1837, and the bank cannot redeem its notes. Just a basic, if you want to withdraw, if you deposit money into a bank and you want to withdraw it, the bank has to be able to have those funds to withdraw to you. Well, this is a terrible time to open a financial institution in May of 1837. There's the national financial panic. Most banks nationwide can't redeem their notes, let alone this little land-strapped, money-tied bank in Kirtland. And when people make a run on the bank to redeem all their notes, they can't redeem them. And people lose a ton of money. There's no better saying than nothing is closer to a person's heart than their wallet. And when people's wallets get hit, their faith gets hit. In July of 1837, both Sidney Rigdon and Joseph resigned from the bank, and Frederick G. Williams and Warren Parrish replaced them. The bank will end up closing in September of 1837. And sometimes it's said, by the way, that Joseph Smith was never convicted of any crimes that he was charged with. Actually, in this, Joseph Smith and Sidney Rigdon are charged with unauthorized banking practices because of the failure of the Kirtland Safety Society to be able to redeem the banknotes, and they're each fined $1,000. This just rocks. It rocks Kirtland because they see promises unfulfilled. They see some mismanagement. They see problems, and they see their money slip away. And Joseph Smith, by the way, is one of the biggest ones who loses a huge sum in the failure of the Kirtland Safety Society. There are some people who can't separate a church business failing from Joseph being the prophet, seer, and revelator who holds the keys of the kingdom of God, the keys of apostleship, and the keys of the ordinances of salvation. They can't separate those two. They almost seem to think that Joseph shouldn't, that the bank shouldn't have failed as a whole if Joseph truly was a prophet. Here, this is right from the Joseph Smith papers. On May 29th, 1837, this is sent to the bishop and his council in the Kirtland, the stake of Zion. We prefer the following charges against President Joseph Smith, Jr. for lying and misrepresentation, also for extortion, and for speaking disrespectfully against his brethren behind their backs. Signed, and look at those names, Lyman E. Johnson and Orson Pratt. Those are two of the members of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles filing these charges against Joseph Smith. Heber C. Kimball would later say that when the bank failed, it was so shattering to people's faith that there weren't 20 people on earth that would declare that Joseph Smith was a prophet of God. It rocked them so hard. Warren Cowdery, who is Oliver Cowdery's brother, writes in the church's own newspaper. Could you imagine if this was printed in the Ensign or now the Liahona magazine? He prints, quote, "Who does not see a principle of popery and religious tyranny involved in such an order of things?" That's not a compliment, by the way, as much as we love and respect the Pope. That is meant as some sort of a priestcraft overreach. It's a cut. It's an insult. Who is worthy of the name of a freeman and thus tamely surrenders the rights, the privileges, and the immunities of an independent citizen? Intelligence of the people is the only guarantee against encroachments upon their liberties, whether those encroachments are from the civil or ecclesiastical power. He writes that in the July 1837 Messenger and Advocate as the Kirtland Safety Society is crumbling. As you can see, Warren Cowdery and others like him they're claiming their constitutional right to say we get to control our property as well. They're not liking the mix of church and state, the mix of church and finance into things as a whole. Historian Ronald Esplin taps into this. He says, quote, "What was at issue was not simply prosperity or economic decline or the failure of the bank, although all of those were important. The central issue for many was their understanding of prophetic leadership. What was the role of a prophet? Was a prophet, like the Protestant minister in American tradition, expected to preach to us on Sunday out of the Book of Mormon or Modern Revelation, but not to lead the community? Or was a prophet to lead a community of gathered saints into a new way of organizing themselves, where all their labors work together to build the kingdom of God on earth?" The second model was what Nauvoo became. This is what Joseph was beginning to teach and trying to implement to some degree in Kirtland. And this, the role of prophetic leadership, was what people divided over. That's fascinating. It wasn't so much the bank. The question was, what's the role of a prophet? Can a prophet direct us in temporal affairs? Or should a prophet only be directing us, giving us spiritual sermons and teaching us like a regular Protestant minister does? It's interesting that the Lord himself earlier in the Doctrine and Covenants had already said, there is no such thing as a temporal commandment. All commandments are spiritual unto me. Oliver Cowdery, by the way, not in Kirtland, but over just a few months later over in Missouri, when he's excommunicated, he says, quote, that he would not be governed by any ecclesiastical authority nor revelation whatever in his temporal affairs. You can see he shares this same, like, let me be independent, as his brother Warren Cowdery as a whole.